On certain winter roads, a tank is not a weapon, it is a moving coffin. That is how one Soviet tanker remembered the day his unit drove straight into an invisible trap near Königsberg in the last, brutal months of World War II. In a matter of minutes, 10 confident steel beasts turned into burning wrecks, and the survivors were forced to confront not only their own mortality, but the utter desperation of the men trying to kill them. The morning began like any other combat march. His column of T-34s rumbled down a long stretch of highway flanked by gray, skeletal trees, the sky low and heavy with winter cloud. Inside the cramped steel shell, the air was thick with exhaust and the smell of oil. Vision was reduced to thin slits of glass and metal as the tanks advanced toward German-held Königsberg. Orders were simple: move fast, punch through, do not stop. There was no artillery barrage, no incoming fire, nothing to hint that the road ahead had been carefully measured, mapped, and prepared by German gunners waiting in silence. The first hit came like a hammer. A deafening blast erupted at the head of the column as the lead tank was struck, erupting into a ball of flame that sent armor fragments whirling across the road. Almost instantly a second explosion tore through the rear of the column as the last tank was knocked out, sealing the rest in a deadly kill zone between two hidden German gun positions. The tanker felt a violent shock as a shell slammed into his own vehicle at close range, punching through the armor and spraying the inside with red-hot fragments and choking smoke. For a heartbeat, he heard nothing but the pounding of his own heart, louder than the roar of engines and the thunder of guns outside. Survival instinct overrode training. He slammed open the hatch and threw himself out, tumbling into the freezing mud at the side of the highway. Behind him, his tank shuddered but did not explode. Miraculously, his entire crew crawled out alive, burned, stunned, but breathing. Other tanks in the column were not so fortunate. Out of roughly 10 vehicles, 4 were destroyed in the ambush, some bursting into infernos that cooked off ammunition and trapped their crews inside. The road was suddenly a corridor of smoke, fire, and twisted metal, with black silhouettes staggering away from burning holes only to collapse a few meters from safety. Under fire from both ends, the surviving Soviet tanks swung their turrets toward the suspected gun positions and fired blindly at flashes among the trees. Dismounted crewmen and infantry hugged the ditches, searching for any depression in the ground that might shield them from shrapnel. The forest edge erupted as Soviet shells found their mark, shredding branches and earth, while German guns kept pounding the immobilized column. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours until, one by one, the German weapons fell silent. The terrible racket of the ambush faded into a crackling hush of burning wrecks and distant gunfire. When the Soviets finally stormed the German gun line, the tanker expected to see triumphant enemies or at least men who had chosen to stand and fight. Instead, he walked into a scene that froze him in place. German artillery pieces and anti-tank guns were dug into the earth, their barrels still pointed at the highway, surrounded by the bodies of their crews. Many of the gunners lay where they had fallen, slumped over their weapons, but something about the way they were positioned seemed wrong, too rigid, too fixed. Then someone shouted, and the truth became clear. Several of the dead gunners were literally chained to their guns. Iron chains looped around waists and wrists were bolted or locked directly to the gun carriages, leaving no possibility of retreat. Some corpses still bore dark, raw marks where the metal had bitten into their skin as they struggled. Others lay twisted at awkward angles, as if they had tried to turn away at the last second and been jerked back by the steel binding them. The men who had set the ambush were not just determined defenders, they had been forced to stand there and fire until the very moment they died. The Soviet tanker had every reason to hate them. Those guns had just destroyed his comrades, turning 4 tanks and their crews into blazing tombs on the road he had barely escaped. Yet as he stared at the chains and the bodies, his hatred collided with a new, unsettling realization. On his side, a man could at least fling himself out of a burning tank and take his chances in the mud. On theirs, some had not even been allowed that final choice. These German gunners had been transformed from soldiers into components of a weapon, bolted in place like spare parts, their lives spent as ammunition. What stayed with him after the battle was not the roar of the guns or even the sight of burning tanks, but the image of those men shackled to cold steel. War, he understood then, did not just kill bodies, it could strip away the last shred of human agency, leaving behind only prisoners of duty and fear on both sides of the barrel. And on that frozen road near Königsberg, amid wrecked armor and scorched earth, it was impossible to say who had truly been more trapped, the crews inside Soviet tanks, or the German gunners chained to their guns, waiting for the next shot, or the final one. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more history that you won't find in the textbooks.